Welcome to the February Business Insights online network interview. This month, Pete Allison will be chairing a Q&A debate with Sandra Baer and Patricia Marleau. So hopefully I pronounced those surnames correctly, but if I didn't, I apologize deeply. I manage to offend people every day anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Pete, over to you, and you guys can cover off everything that you're going to cover off. Take it away.
Thanks, Guy, and welcome, Sandra and Patricia. So I think we've got a really interesting half hour ahead of us now. Any of you who've been involved with the Business Insights over the years will know Sandra's been involved with us since almost the very beginning of the Business Insights project, back when COVID hit, and has been with us in various forms and shapes and sizes, and then joined us live in the UK for some of the content as well. So we've done some fabulous work in some of Sandra's question storming work. And then Patricia is a more recent friend we've made and a partner for the business, who joined us just ahead of the South Gloucester Business Show that we did in October 22. And Patricia is heavily involved in professional services around immigration, but I'm not going to try and introduce it because I'd never do justice to either of you. I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves. So before we get into the subject matter, Sandra, do you want to just introduce yourself, explain to everyone who you are, and say hello?
Oh, of course. Thank you, Pete. It's a pleasure to be on this conversation with Patricia. I'm the CEO of Personal Cities, based in Washington, D.C. We really focused on helping cities understand how to reshape their future. And a lot of that has to do with all the changes that are going on in our world today. I'm also the brand ambassador at Smart Cities World, which is based in London, a really incredible media platform for communicating, inspiring, and educating city leaders and people around the world about what's going on in cities globally. So pleased to be here. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sandra. Patricia, do you want to just say hello to everyone?
Yes. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for having me. I'm Patricia Marleau, and I'm from Bradley Haynes Law, a firm of solicitor, and I head the immigration services team. And we support, I work closely with families and businesses in our communities that are struggling with UK labour shortage, but also sometimes it's just someone just wants to experience or have a change of career and wants to experience working in the UK, and I can help with that as well. I have a big passion for human rights. Unfortunately, I do not do any asylum refugee work, but I'm very, very interested in the subject. So I do make sure I keep an eye on it. And if I can get involved in conversation like today, I'm so pleased to have met Sandra, and I'm looking forward to hear everything she has to bring to that conversation. So yeah, coming from Canada, I think we have a good, I have a good base influence of how, inclusivity, diversity in terms of welcoming migrants in the country. And I think the UK is on a good path as well. So
fabulous. And we've certainly got a good North American feel to this, although I have to say, Sandra, I think, sitting in Washington, D.C., I think, I'm pretty confident she is, in this conversation. And Patricia sitting in, well, I'm going to say Worcester, because I know that's where professionally you're based, but I don't know whether you're actually there or not. But of course, as you say, you've got a Canadian background, so there's a real transatlantic feel to what we're doing now, but hopefully transatlantic in a good sense. So I've got a few questions lined up for me, which we've been kind of thinking about how we introduce this subject. And there's going to be a little element of some for Sandra and some for Patricia. But the first one I want to give both of you a crack at, really. Immigration and migrant workers are often thought of as a threat in our business community. We've got skills gaps and workforce shortages. How do you see those factors reconciling, and how should we be looking at increasingly mobile international workforce, especially with the younger generation coming along? Patricia, do you want to kick that one off?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to start, I think we can be a bit picky on words. Are they a threat? That is the question. If there is a UK shortage, a labour shortage, it's because there is a genuine need to recruit talent, specific skill set to fill vacancy in our business communities. Labor shortages impact on all of us, individually and as a community. So, and I think it's about educating people in our business community about the opportunities available, whether it is through training, upskilling, apprenticeship, and those could be for people settled in the UK, people with refugee status. We can definitely look at training, upskilling, and skilling them, or sponsoring migrant workers and recruiting from overseas. When it comes to employing migrant workers, whether they have been granted refugee status or hold a work permit or have a partner visa in the UK, we just have to look at their contribution to the performance of the individual businesses they work for and have established in our communities. We look at their culturally unique and complementary skills, knowledge and processes, different ways of working even, and ideas they bring to the workplace. They sometimes even upskill colleagues, leading to improvement in process and innovation and securing new work for the business. They may have international connection, which may benefit the business, allowing expansion into new markets. That's something that when I led a panel discussion previously, there was a Chinese national who had a business in the UK and a business in China. And it was so fascinating to see how he overcome the culture, the difference, or some of the clashes sometimes. And I say clashes, not really, but they just had to take time and sit down and get to know each other, and why one would react a certain way, why one might find it offensive, but how can they work together and make that work? And also it expanded their market, because they were bringing different experience, different point of view, different way of seeing, approaching things. So that was pretty amazing. So basically having a global outlook helps to identify opportunities and new openings.
Certainly breadth and depth of culture in a business is we see. Sandra, you're obviously looking at this from quite a different, in the sense of American, different perspective to how do we do. But we hear a lot in the media in the UK about these issues and race and culture. Well, how do you look at the response to that sort of opportunity versus skill threats?
Yeah, and I think Patricia's right. Let's consider the words, because people viewing it as a threat versus an opportunity or a way to improve your culture. I mean, it's really an attitudinal mindset idea. And just as a fact of our planet today, there are 280 million global refugees. The US has about 48 million. I think the UK has about 500,000, immigrants, refugees currently being brought into the country. So, it's a different level of numbers, but I think that the immigration status is changing all the time. And frankly, I think that's based on what I consider a stage of disruption in our planet. Not just beyond the pandemic, which we're still, of course, experiencing, but economic inequality, economic inequality of opportunity, political divisiveness, social, racial injustices. I mean, so many issues, and of course the climate, and so many issues are affecting how we deal with people moving around the planet. It's really, there's so many positive things about migration, and many people choose to migrate. Many of the people that have come to the US have certainly chosen to come to the US. Same with the UK. They want to be in Britain, and they've voted with their feet. So they've made an incredible commitment to move. I mean, many have come for difficult reasons, such as, terrorist action or political strife. So I think, it's sort of like, why are people coming to these? Why are they moving? And, what is it that business can do to really create a welcoming atmosphere for those people. So, you know, I think the disruption that I talk about affects our work life, our workplace, the workforce, certainly our economy, our ability to find long and short-term employment, housing, education. I mean, all of these factors are affecting our perception of how we deal with immigration. But I think as we move through this conversation, Pete and Patricia, I think we will see that there's a lot of good that we can do to sort of make this world a more welcoming place.
Yeah, absolutely. And picking up on your comment there about people choosing to migrate, obviously we're all familiar with migrant workers. We all have friends in our world who are not of the same nationality, the country they're based in. And it's sometimes, certainly in the UK, with the amount of media noise that goes on about illegal immigration and asylum seeking, obviously
Yes.
that's only a small subset of a much, much bigger story. Sandra, I've got a question I'm going to lob a little bit at you from the international perspective and what you see in the personal world side, smart cities world side. Multicultural staff teams and management teams, they can bring a dimension and understanding to business that can really strengthen its offering. If you had the ear of a managing director or CEO somewhere in the world, let's not worry about where it is, you can use different examples. What would you say to them about the benefits of working with international workers within their own businesses?
Well, the benefits are incredible. I mean, they can actually improve an economy. They can fill a labor shortage. They can bring diversity of culture and language. I mean, the benefits of embracing migrants into a culture are so enormous. They can certainly improve an economy. It's interesting to me that in my research about immigration, Sergey Brin, the founder of Google, immigrated from Russia. Satya Nadella, who's the CEO of Microsoft, came from India. You know, I think it's something like 40% of leadership in business around the world have migrated from other countries. So it's interesting that you know, we would not see this as an opportunity. And I guess some of the actions to take, first of all, is to figure out, you know, how can we help refugees or immigrants get work? How can we provide, you know, a workplace environment for them to actually, you know, use their skills? Certainly the high talent skills. I mean, cities should be magnets for migrants if they have talent shortages or if they need, you know, to strengthen their labor force. I think some other, you know, the language and the skills barriers are huge, but basically, if businesses are smart, they, you know, they work with nonprofits, they work with other organizations, you know, to really help them understand. You know, here are the needs. Here's what we need. You know, a business company could actually develop goods and services that refugees need. I mean, think about how some people coming from Kenya or Somalia or Ukraine, they have certain needs that may not fit the current culture and the current business environment, but they could, the businesses could actually try to serve those needs in different ways. So those are just a couple ideas to start off about actions that business could take.
Yeah, and what I take away a little bit from what you're saying there is we're dealing with a lot of cultural preconceptions.
Yes.
So actually, as you know, as managers, as senior managers, as staff teams go in, and we're all familiar with the, you know, in the UK to kind of a very well used phrase, that white middle class sort of, you know, and the glass ceilings and all of those things that sit in the equality and diversity and inclusion discussion, they all apply here. Totally. One factor of that, of course, is to do with the generational and the age. And, you know, as we look into the future, we see future generations growing up in a more internationally mobile environment, just by dint of who they are and what they grow up with. And of course, climate change is something we learn to sort of begin to understand and begin to concern with over the last 10 years. But our children and, you know, future generations are very much growing up with that as a part of what they're doing. So staying with Sandra for a minute, in a world where climate change and conflict is driving greater immigration, and with a greater socially mobile population, what do we see as the challenges and opportunities that are coming down the line that we should be concerned about, or should we be embracing them? How does that look like in times to come, do you feel?
Yeah, it's so interesting to try to look forward about this situation. Obviously, the war in Ukraine has had a huge impact not only on the world economy, but also on the immigration issues. I mean, I think that it has raised awareness, more so perhaps than the immigrants coming from Syria years ago, or the constant, in the US, the constant flow of immigration from the southern border, from Mexico, and actually from the northern border in Canada. So I think there's your question is very challenging. Where are we headed with this? And what are the actions, especially that business can take, to sort of think in a more forward-looking path? One of the ideas is to really get business to work with nonprofits, and the nonprofits that work with refugees. I mean, what can businesses do to partner with them? Because it's going to be good for their ESG, their environment, service, and governance issues that used to be called corporate social responsibility. But I think, being a leader, being a model, being a business that says we know that there are benefits of dealing with the immigration population, and that it's good for business and it's good for our country, whatever that country is. So I think it's sort of like thinking ahead to your obligation. What is your obligation as a company to do the right thing? And we talk about it. Can we actually implement it? But I think having businesses serve as a role model for other businesses, and having everyday people get involved, get informed, get active in helping the immigration community. I mean, I think that's where the future is. We're just going to have to be more involved, more engaged.
That's really interesting, and that is going to grow on us, because obviously we are dealing with a more mobile generation. Yeah, interesting. I'm going to throw a question or two at Patricia now. Many nations and politicians take the view there should be a greater priority when you're retaining skilled opportunities for nationals as a priority. And the UK at the moment, certainly, whether or not that's explicit, we certainly see that implied. Let's keep UK jobs, in this kind of game. And it's a political area that as well. And at the end of the day, we're talking about a business community, and there's a potential conflict there. But what's your policy? What's your view on how government policy should be embracing immigration and international policies, and even the UK or frankly anywhere globally?
Well, I think, I can maybe look more at the UK, working in the UK in immigration. There's always a need for a shake-up of immigration rules. We always say that the Home Office should ease some of the visa requirements. It could be just an asylum seeker should they be allowed to work whilst their claims are being process. Usually they might have to wait until they get their refugee status, but they're vulnerable people, so when they come to the UK, with very little money, depending on what their background is. But I also wanted to talk about GPs and doctors. Just to give you a bit of statistic, the British Medical Association, the BMA, over the last year reported that over the last year we lost a total of 662 individual GPs since December 2021, and around 48% of current trainee GPs require a visa. At the moment, for a GP, it takes 3 years for them to train, but if they want to stay here, apply for indefinite leave to remain, they need to have been in the UK for 5 years. So they have a 2-year gap before they are eligible to settle here, and they struggle to find sponsorship to remain in the UK. So some of them have to leave and go back home, but there is a shortage in the UK, and they are qualified, they are brilliant, talented workers that the UK needs. So the medical professionals are currently lobbying and speaking with the Home Office and trying to find ways, talking about umbrella bodies that could be considered to sponsor those GPs. So that's one element, but there's also GPs or doctors in general come to the UK. We have amazing, for example, neurosurgeon coming from Asia, just to give an example, and they are here, but when their family, their life is here, they work here, their elderly parents remain in their home country, and when they get, older, they want to bring them over, look after them. It is a real struggle, and it's affecting their own well-being, and it can impact also on the future of the medical workforce. So that's another area where that people are lobbying to try to how can we find ways, because it's quite difficult to bring an adult dependent relative. That's what the requirements are, and the requirements that you have to meet to meet that definition. The burden of proof is really, really heavy. So it makes it hard, and then we end up either losing exceptional medical staff because they either have to go back home, or it's impacting on their well-being whilst they're in the UK, and on our well-being. They're looking after us. So this is just an example of how the immigration rules could be reformed to help us as a community.
And just as a subsidiary on that same question area, I mean, you flag up there the medical profession and the GPs and what have you, and clearly there's a lot of media noise going on at the moment in the UK around the whole NHS and medical and things, and it's not the only reason why GP practices and the medical environment is struggling a little bit at the moment. But referring back to the sort of government policy aspects of what you said there, I'm assuming from what you're saying that this is something we are going to have to come to terms with, because the ultimate trajectory of what you're saying is you end up without any GPs in the UK.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? They leave the country, or it is extremely difficult. And also there's the dare I say, Brexit. It was a bit easier because we could recruit talent from Europe, and it was easier, and actually some sectors relied heavily on medical professionals, not necessarily doctors, but coming from Europe. But now it's different. It's hard because everybody's in the same pool, which in a way, we're not going to get political, but we should all be given an equal opportunity to progress or do what we want to do in our career and serve our communities. But I think it is definitely a hot topic, and we shouldn't just see it as, oh, they're doctors, they should have, it should be easier for them to have their family coming over. Or I think there's a bigger picture we have to look at, and also what country do they often come from, what's the culture. I think those are all things that we absolutely need to consider.
I'm just diving slightly off piece for a second, and forgive me for this, Sandra, but I'm just intrigued, actually, anecdotally. I know I'm dropping something on Sandra that she hasn't had a chance to really think about here, but I know well enough to do this. It just, as you look at that perspective and what we're flagging there in the UK, which of course is a government-funded health service, which is quite different from the American business model, for want of a phrase. Do you see in the States, do you see a prevention of a group of foreign migrant workers in the health service, and is that an issue, or is that rolling on, or do you have any knowledge around that at all?
Yeah, probably not. I think regarding health service per se, but I do. It was interesting what Patricia says, because I feel like, you know, there's a huge quantity of applicants. I think 190,000 for maybe 45,000 high talent visas in the U.S.
Yeah.
So in other words, doctors, lawyers, medical professionals, et cetera. And they, you know, there's a huge interest in sharing high talent skills, and yet not enough visas are going around to allow that to happen. So it's a conundrum, I think. You know, and just to add to your question, I think is, you know, how are we changing the mindset beyond government action, beyond business action? You know, I think Amnesty International, or maybe another organization, forgive me, has this mantra that, you know, no human being is illegal. We used to call migrants to the U.S. illegal aliens. Good Lord. Seeking asylum is a human right. Refugees should always be welcome. And just, you know, I mean, it's like, wait a minute, let's get our heads together on this. So just two quick examples, if I may, Pete. One is this interesting, it was written up in the Washington Post not too long ago, an interesting city in Quebec. Patricia, you may know it. It's called Terraville. It's an old, small, rural town that had absolutely terrible restrictions against immigrants. And they've sort of turned it around for a number of reasons. And I won't go elaborate the story, but, you know, a workforce shortage, needs to you know, provide services, an aging population, and overall a younger population that is really open to accepting migrants and accepting asylum seekers, and you know, not caring that they're disrupting the culture of Quebec, for example, but, you know, embracing it, adopting it. And one other example in the U.S., I mean, there are many cities in the United States that are famous for welcoming migrants, and some all over the U.S., by the way. But there's a community in Pennsylvania that I've worked with, and their training, their welcoming ideas are to say, don't call them migrants or immigrants or refugees or asylum seekers, call them new Americans. So I love that idea. I mean, I think this is where the action is. You know, if we can start from there, rather than saying, well, you know, you're just going to have to adapt to our culture. You're going to have to find ways to fit in. You know, let's reverse that. Let's flip that coin and be political, be active, and get involved. Oh, my final comment about this is this book. It's called The Bill of Obligations by Dr. Richard Haas. It just came out. I just heard Dr. Haas speak yesterday about this. I want everyone to read it, which is why I'm pushing this book for no financial gain. But it's sort of what we talked about earlier. You know, what are our obligations to help others? And, you know, how can business do that? How can government do that? How can, you know, the community as an ecosystem reach out and help? And I think it's out there. I'm certainly sensing it from the people I talk to that are involved in migration. Yeah, the book title is The Bill of Obligations. Oh, I'm saying the wrong thing.
Brilliant. So I'm going to go back to Patricia, but you set the question that I just want to lob up Patricia up very well, because we've been talking about our obligations going forward. You've been mentioning that on the obligations, and we've been talking about examples of towns and cities that have really worked out racism and how our culture should change. Now, the fact of the matter is, as best we can tell from where we look at it now, with economic and climate and political challenges that are going on globally, many countries, possibly all the Western countries certainly, will be seeing pressure from displaced workers through conflict or climate, seeking asylum and seeking opportunities to rebuild new lives and new cultures and new environments. That's not going to change. That as best we can tell, is a trend which is only going to grow and develop. So I'm just going to lob a question at Patricia here. What do you see that should our approach be as a society to asylum seekers and integrating them into the UK workforce? Because it's resistive at its simplest level at the moment. And that
Yeah.
potentially isn't a viable long-term sustainable situation, is it?
I think it's an interesting one and a very political one, I'd say, when you start talking about climate refugees and environment migrant. It's a very, very current topic subject, and I would say whatever the expression, unfortunately in the UK, whatever the expression we use, a person fleeing an epidemic, natural disaster, or a famine is unlikely, and I emphasize on unlikely, to be a refugee within the terms of the Refugee Convention. And that is our starting point. We need to look at, in order to, as a society, and including business communities, in order um, in order to welcome them in our communities, something needs to happen. Like you correct, no one is illegal. And I actually bought that book. I'm yet to read it, but no one is illegal. We need to find a way, whether we need to change the definition in the Refugee Convention, or we come up with new legal and policies framework entirely in individual countries, or in another way, but it will need to happen, because at the moment, more often than not, they would have to come as economic migrant. I hate that expression, but that's how the expression that is used. And that will be difficult. And we have to remember, each country, including the UK, has positioned itself as a leader on climate change, and is committed under the Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migrants, GCM. I've learned that. I'm sure you're very familiar with it, Sandra. But these are expression, or that I have to familiar myself more with. But I have looked at the 23 objective of the Global Compact of Migration, that it's a UN global agreement on the common approach to international migration. And I've just pulled out some of them, some objectives that I think as a society and business communities, we could all look at and apply it. So basic thing: facilitate fair and ethical recruitment and safeguard conditions to ensure decent work. So talking about equal opportunity, diversity, no discrimination, that is basic things, but that needs to be at the core of our values, ethos within business communities. Address and reduce vulnerability in migration. Well, we need to educate ourselves and the business community to be able to spot signs of modern slavery and human trafficking. Because I think, this is a personal opinion, but I think the climate change, if people are displaced, they will become more vulnerable and subject to be trapped. And so we need to be be able to spot signs. And also empower migrants in our society, including business communities, to realize full inclusion and social cohesion. So strong relationship and sense of solidarity within the workplace. We can spend days discussing this, how we can implement that, but that is definitely something that a business will have to sit down and see, how can we work this within our business? So eliminate all forms of discrimination and promote evidence-based public discourse to shape perception of migration. We've discussed that. And the last one, invest in skills development and facilitate mutual recognition of skills, qualification, and competences. It's key to integrate them in our UK workforce. Goes back to what we've discussed earlier. They will bring a different outlook. They may have a qualification that is not relevant to the job they've been employed to do, but they can bring more to our business communities and our society. And it needs to be an exchange. And I think we should look at those 23 objectives. And
well, it's certainly yes, it's certainly I'm going to say complex matter. It's a complex conversation. That's probably the word I'm looking for. And it aligns, as we see, very closely with the equality, diversity, and inclusion broader discussion that we have running. This discussion, this interview that we've got now, is part of the Business Insights project, and it's part of a thread that we have seen developing over the last 2 years in a low-key way, but it's become more in the centre of peace. And I think it started with a piece of work we did in this same thing with Sandra a little while ago. And then Patricia, you've joined us when obviously as our shows have come back into the live space, we've begun to, once we begin to have our heads around what that conversation starts to look like, it's such a huge conversation that it's difficult to sort of pretend that we can tackle the whole thing. But we had a great discussion at the South Gloucestershire show back in November with 3 business owners who themselves were migrants to the UK with workforces, and we're looking forward to the same thing, not the same thing again, I'm sure it'll be very different, but in March with a follow through. So thank you both very much indeed for your different perspectives on what we're doing here. We're looking forward certainly to the next chapter of the story with Patricia in March at the Dutton Town Hall for the Gloucester Business Show. And I'm quite sure we'll be continuing this both at the live shows in the future and with Business Insights. But thank you both very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you,
You're welcome.
Pete.
Thank you.
Guy, back to you.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, sorry. Yes, I didn't ask the questions. Jill, go for
Well,
it.
let's carry on recording then.
So I guess my question is, getting back to what you guys were talking about a little bit earlier in the piece, is there a lack of sharing the good news stories around where migration of any sort, in or out, has provided significant benefit to businesses or to their communities, and how might that be addressed?
Well, I just step in. You've put your finger on it, Jill, because I think communication about what is happening and communication about the stories of businesses that can model for other businesses how to welcome in migrants. I mean, I think the storytelling is key. And as Patricia and Pete mentioned about, actually having entrepreneurs that are migrants talk about their experience and giving advice about what they could do or what our society could do to help them integrate into the society they've moved to. I mean, I think that's where the action is. And, telling those stories, doing more to tell the good news. I mean, we don't have enough of that in our world. And when you look at the refugee camps, I mean, there are people that have lived in a refugee camp for 30 years, their entire life. I mean, can you imagine it? None of us can. So I think that the idea to tell the good story, to communicate what's happening, we just need to do so much more of that. If Pete was going to give me a closing thought, that would have been it. So thank you for the question, Jill. I think you're right on the money.
Patricia,
No, I think that's correct. And also, it's certainly in the UK, if you mention immigration, people just think refugees. That's all they think. But also something I've started noticing, but it's also I need to change my own mindset because I work with the Home Office and I always use the same expression. We need to change the way we talk about migration. There are people. They're not labeled migrant. They have names. They have, they have a story. And I think we need to, this year, one of my mission is try to move away from some of the expression, the words that we use, and maybe bring the subject in a different ways, and people just to take away some of the stigma or that people may have. But yeah, I agree. We need to speak more. Well, like events like this, I think that's the best way. We're starting the conversation, and we are hoping that will make people think and talk about it.
I have to add just one more thought, Jill, which is that, and it was from Pete's first question about, are they a threat? And, certainly this is a complex issue. It's not like we can just tell good stories and change mindsets, but, the fact that people consider there's overcrowding from migration, there's extra pressure to take jobs away, or extra pressure on public services being able to help these people, housing, language, education, all of these things it's a big, difficult challenge. But I do think that communicating it, as you say, Patricia, sort of changing the way you think about the situation is where I think a lot of us could help.
I did have one fairly random thought while you guys were talking about migration, which was that, particularly in the UK, when we start getting into the spring and the swallows arrive, yeah, they're migrants. They're welcomed with open arms and celebrated, and that's really,
Yes.
we
Yeah.
should treat people the same way.
Yeah. And Jill, to carry that thought on, they come over and they immediately start to spread loads of pollen on the backs of the legs and put it all sorts of other places as well, don't they? So, yeah.
Great analysis.
I love Patricia's point about the labelling, because there is too much labelling in the world, right the way across the board. You know, one of the words I absolutely hate is dementia. As a different thing, yeah, because as soon as you hear dementia, you think demented, you think mad. It's not. It's just very, very unfortunate. I had a specific, that was just an aside, I had a specific thing that I wanted to mention. I was brought up in the northeast of England, in the last days of our shipbuilding industry in the northeast of England. In fact, my first proper job when I left school was to go and work in a shipyard in the offices. One of the shipyards we were in was building a merchant vessel on behalf of the Iranian family, the royal family in Iran, literally just before the overthrow by the Ayatollah. And when that happened, all of these people who were living in Newcastle, who were helping outfit and helping advise on this, immediately became refugees. Because of a cultural revolution in their country, they immediately became refugees. In fact, what happened, I was at college in the main college in Newcastle, and all of the kids, a lot of the kids that I knew there were Iranian, brilliantly cultured people. And within 2 weeks, we had some of the Savama, who were the new Iranian secret police, the Revolutionary Guard, infiltrating into the college. To try and subvert, and in fact to try and kidnap some of these children, who were children of Iranian loyalist Navy officials. As a consequence, and I flashed this up earlier, as a consequence, 44 years ago, I joined Amnesty International. And I'm still a member of Amnesty International. I campaign, I do lots and lots of different things. There are a few dichotomies in my life because I'm also a supporter of Newcastle United, who got bought by Saudi Arabia. But then again, there are dichotomies everywhere you look. But one of the things that happened, and this circles back to my conclusion to this, is a lot of these Iranian people, they would be accepted by within the college in Newcastle, they'd be accepted to a certain degree. But one of the things that we're most scared about, and this is immigration in a nutshell, is the fact that we're scared of what we don't know and we're scared of what we don't understand. So it's an education thing. And to take the education thing as a little bit of a humorous aside, I used to work for a company that was heavily involved in advertising effectiveness all over the world. We dealt with advertising agencies. I remember sitting in our office in Henley-on-Thames and being told that about 20 people from a big Japanese agency were coming to our offices to visit. Nobody had any clue. So I had to, for the next hour, I had to teach the whole of our office how to give and receive business cards for the Japanese culture. And it is totally different. Luckily, I knew, because I've done business over there and everything like that. You actually have to wait there. You have to bow your head. You have to put there. They will look from about 2 feet away and read what your job title is. And then they might just pass it on to someone further down the line who's of about the same business standing as you. So it's all about getting to know other people's cultures and not being afraid.
Yeah, that's very good. Thank you for sharing that.
Brilliant.
Growth mindsets, not fixed mindsets.
Thank you.
Totally. And do you know the shame of it? You can't get Bill of Obligations on Kindle.
Not yet.
No?
No.
I mean,
I
I heard it on Audible, and I have a copy of the book, but
yeah. Well, if you
Go
got
for
it,
it.
if you got it on Audible, if you can send me the link, because it doesn't look like it's on Audible in this country, Sandra, then I'll download it.
oh,
and
that would be so weird. Yeah. All right.
I'll listen to it through my headphones when I'm about
You will love
50
it.
miles away from Iran the day after
Everyone
tomorrow.
should read it. And the really good news about this book is there are 10 obligations, and the book is like 140 pages. So you can, it's not like a thick book that is intimidating to people, but he's really smart about it. It actually fits in with the idea of thinking about immigration in new ways. So,
and if you want the most wonderful example of immigration, you just have to look at the United States and Canada. Because let's face it, go back 250 years, 300 years, when everyone started to go over, maybe a little bit further, those countries would not be the wonderful countries they are today without the massive influx from all over the world.
it is our history.
Yeah, we can't argue with that, can we, Sandra?
No.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you so much. Really, really interesting discussion. Thank you.